Hi everyone, welcome. Glad you're here. Glad you're using your 1 hour that you can, I don't know, do something else and be here with us. I'm Stjepan. This is Martin. We are from the nonprofit tech shop and digital reach, and we are running the only nonprofit HubSpot user group, and we have a lot to cover today, but the topic is HubSpot Brain for nonprofits. So before we go to the session fully, let's just do some quick housekeeping items. Put all your questions in the chat. We'll try to get to them. And also, we will send you some recaps. This is being recorded, and you can always reach out to us. Something about me. So as you can see, head of enablement and training here. I'm a proud dad of 2 kids, and I'm also running a podcast with Martin that's called the RevOps Loop. But everything else, I think you can just read off this. But over to you, Martin, and then I can just start the session.
Yeah, no, sounds good. I feel like Stjepan kept it short because my description was so much shorter than his. But yeah, I'm Martin. I work with Stjepan. I'm working on as the head of marketing solutions and strategy at Digital Reach and Nonprofit Tech Shop. So yeah, working mostly on projects related to go to markets, whether it's RevOps, marketing ops, and primarily in the nonprofit industry. And as you mentioned, we also co-run some podcasts together. More on that later.
Okay, let's move to the next slide. So one announcement we have today. So our founder, Mandy, and our head of business development, Karen, they launched a nonprofit support group podcast. You can find it, typing that in the YouTube channel or Spotify and going to the website also. So they just are having great conversations, what's happening between scenes across mission-driven organizations. We were recently at AAM, and we are also supporting a lot of like nonprofits with our services. You can also scan the QR code here and join the Nonprofit Hawk Slack channel. This is the only one official, and this is where we get and share our wins, potholes, solutions, templates, links to like checklists and everything, how-to videos, and we collaborate and try to solve an issue there. So inviting you to scan it. If you don't have your mobile phone at you now, we will also resurface it at the end of the session. But let's jump into it. What we mean about HubSpot for nonprofits. So first off, what this talk is and isn't. So basically, this talk is about structure. It's about objects, associations, lifecycle stages, the decisions that will determine how your data is organized, the skeleton. And why is it so important? Because as a nonprofit, HubSpot is mainly targeted to like startups and B2B businesses. So like maybe the wording or how they're called is different, but it's the same if you think about it. And the talk is not about like workflows, a breeze deep dive, or AI agents. We will cover that in the next sessions because we will have a session every month. We'll also cover which sessions we have at the end of this presentation, so stay with us. So we have a couple of parts we want to tackle. Part one, autonomy of CRM, what makes up a CRM, a core architecture, how do you define your core CRM needs, and then how to do the application part, because this is the one that is most important for you, your organization, and your teams. So let's dive into the anatomy of a CRM. So as you can see here, we like to keep it visual. We use our like lucid charts and everything to make sure that everything is very visual. So we start first with this pyramid, and at the bottom you can see there's four layers, and there's like the data model, and we call it the brain. Why is it the brain? Because it's your objects. It's your properties where you store the data, your associations, how the system understands the world, if you would like to say that way. Everything else is built on top of it. Then we have the automation, the reflexes. The workflows are firing, the records are updating, the sequences and email marketing nurtures are sending. So everything is fast, automatic, and reacts to everything that you build in the data model, the brain. Then we go to the reporting. This is the memory. It's what your CRM remembers and recalls when somebody asks, What happened last year? Was our campaign successful? Was our end of year donor engagement more better than the last year? And then we have AI. HubSpot uses Breeze, but there's also a lot of LLMs that connect to HubSpot, like GPT or Claude, and this is the amplifier because in nowadays it makes everything underneath it louder and faster. And now here's the rule at what makes this whole pyramid matter. Every layer inherits the one beneath it, and your reflexes can only react to what the brain understands. So, and that's why this order matters, because we have an example here. So let's say the board, you go to a board meeting and there's a question: how many unique donors gave to our housing program last year, and how many renewed? Put in the chat pane if you can easily answer this question or similar questions uh, in 10 seconds. Yes, no. Just put it in the chat pane. We want to see your response there. But start at the brain level. So this is the data model. So turns out the housing program lives in 3 different places in your portal that don't agree with each other. A property here, a tag here, a deal pipeline stage over there. So there's no single source of truth. The brain is confused. Then there's reflexes. So every workflow needs to guess which version to use. What is the renewal reminder? What is the thank you sequence? How do you send those? What's the trigger? What are the lists that you're using for? And there's memory, because that's the reporting stuff that you will get the data from. So nobody trusts the dashboards, and they're right not to. So what actually happens is that, like, for example, what we see a lot is two staff members spend 4 hours cross-referencing 3 sources to hand build one number, and the board still isn't fully confident. And probably that sounds familiar to you guys. And then there's AI, because now with Breeze agents, you can ask this question today, but it flagged the disagreement because it cannot see it because the brain is confused. So here's the line I want you to take to your next leadership meeting. So technical depth in CRM doesn't show an error. Your system won't like beep or flag it. It won't turn red. It just shows up at the board meeting as a number nobody can defend and nobody can trust. That's why we built from the bottom up. So let's move to the next one. Maarten, please. So
Why
the
this
trap,
happens.
yeah, the trap of immediate needs. Why are we covering this? So because many portals start with a deadline, and that's not a design. So that can be a deadline, that a migration that has to be completed by next month, a spreadsheet that finally broke and now you want to migrate it to the CRM, a year end appeal that cannot wait. So you, or the classic one that you're just in your organization, you inherited a portal 3 weeks before a campaign that's already in motion, and now you're just trying to keep it alive, do some things quickly, and move the data in your system. And I do get it. We both get it. And when something's on fire, you put out a fire, but you don't stop to design the fire department. Just like a simple example. But here's the question I want you to sit with every time you make a structural decision: are you building the campaign in front of you or the organization behind you? Because the campaign in front of you will end in 6 weeks, but the organization behind you is still going to be here in 10, 5 years, living and capturing all the data. So we don't want to take it as a shortcut, because the shortcuts are easy, they give you quick wins, but that's not how you progress and make more impact with the organization you're working for. So the good news is that building it right the first time isn't actually slower. It just requires asking the right question first. And this is where we go to the second part, the architecture part that Maarten will cover. There's a lot to cover, and please do ask questions if you have anything that, yeah. So go ahead, Maarten.
Yeah, yeah, and definitely, guys, shoot questions in the chat. Happy to take them at the end. We can also follow up afterwards, right? But I think so. That was sort of an important kickoff, if you will, to I guess frame the discussion a bit more. So why we focus on the brain, if you will, the data foundations, and not as much on the reflexes, the automations. And I think we'll have several sessions more on that, which is like, hey, how do you build cool automation for your organization that help you forward? But I think the core component that we're trying to highlight here is none of that really matters if the data model isn't right. So speaking about that, how do you then actually start designing what that data model looks like? Because that's obviously also easier said than done in most cases. So I want to walk through a couple of use cases, ways that we approach it on our side. Very open also to just hear suggestions from folks here. But the main thing, just to kick this off, how would we go about this, getting to grips with what kind of data model we need? The key rule that we like to use is this working backwards approach. So we are often looped in to projects with nonprofit organizations where, okay, CRM clearly needs a revamp, a rebuild. It's not really meeting requirements. We're not able to pull reports the way we need to. The adoptability is low. Folks aren't really using the CRM the way they should. And then typically when you get in, there's a mix of immediate needs, right? Actually, we need a campaign to launch next month. So can you help us pull this data together? While then another group within the organization is more focused on auditing and cleaning up and retroactive cleanups. And so that can get quite messy. And so one thing that we like to do is, all right, let's just work backwards, start with the requirements. So as reporting requirements are gold mines essentially, and they really tell you how you should be organizing your data based on how you need to report on it. So what we like to do is get lists together of what those actual requirements are. So that's, hey, if you're building board decks, grant reports, right, funder dashboards, but then also asking per team, hey, on the marketing operations side, when you're talking about campaign performance, what, just in your own words, what would you need to report on? What would those numbers look like? Same thing for your annual impact reports. Like, just start gathering all of those requirements, and then we'll go through an example in a second of how from that initial requirement, can be a simple one-line sentence, we can work backwards and start saying, okay, then that means our data needs to be structured this way, that way. We need these properties to help us build that. So that's sort of a general rule of thumb that we like to apply, and some examples from our own work, really. So these are based off of real projects that we've worked on that have come out of that year. Here's two of them. So one is a pretty classic one. We owe a funder a quarterly reports of dollars restricted to their grant and the outcomes that those dollars produced, right? So that's one specific team that said, hey, that is something that I need to pull together on a quarterly basis. Right now, it takes quite a lot of time. We're not really sure about the data, but okay, leave that aside. Let's just work backwards from that one sentence. That one sentence already tells us quite a lot. We need a way to determine restricted versus unrestricted grants, right? Okay, we need an identifier for that. We need outcome records, right? We need a way to tell what the outcome was of a specific grant. So that needs to be shown into our system somehow, right? Gift tagging, right? So from that one sentence, immediately we're not even talking about CRM objects just yet, right? We're just talking about needs, things that we need to be able to track in our portal. Similar example, right? We want the email donors who have given to our housing program last year or in 2022, but haven't given since, whatever it may be. Okay, based off of that, we need a couple of things. We need donation details. We need to be able to see what donations go towards. Okay, great. Donation history, time-stamped donation history. Okay, write that down. And we need lifecycle or engagement statuses, right? Like, well, is the donor active? Is it passive? Is it lapsed? Like, from those initial requirements, we already have a pretty good idea of what our brain or what our data model needs to be able to represent. And from there, we can go then one step further, right? So we won't go through it in too much detail, but you get the idea of, all right, grant tagging. How do I actually go about doing that? Well, there's different ways. Either I can create a property on a grant record and then tag that as restricted, unrestricted. I can use association labels, right? Just translating all those specific needs into CRM language, if you will, right? Donation details as well. Okay, I need structured properties, program donated to, amounts, payment method, date. Just list those all out. Those outcome records, right? We know we need to be able to report on outcomes of specific grants. All right, what should those outcomes? What does that look like in our CRM? Is that a specific object? Do we need outcome custom objects? Perhaps, right? If they have their own history, We might need to create a custom object, or is a snapshot enough? And in that case, we could say, no, the grant is the object and the outcome is a property on that grant, something along those lines. So kind of working the same thing. We're still working backwards from that initial request and slowly translating everything into CRM needs. And one thing that this exercise typically does is start highlighting contradictions or gaps, right? Where you say, hey, here we're saying this property needs to live on a grant level, but here we're actually talking about a specific pipeline for outcome records, right? That doesn't match. Let's bring those together. And so that way you're slowly building out, what that entire data model would look like. And again, so this is based off of best practice, perhaps not the right word, but ways that we would go about sort of messier portal revamp projects like this, is that working backwards based off of requirements. And so just to summarize that section of it, it's not one person doing that. The first step is really talk to your teams, get all the requirements from the different teams, document what everyone wants and needs to report on, what data is important, right? And again, always encourage to do that in their own words, right? Because I think sometimes folks misinterpret certain CRM language. It's always easier if you just say, hey, in your own words, what do you need to report? What is important to you? Let's bring that all together. Then start mapping all of that, right? So like we did in that second slide there. So translating everything into CRM lingo, if you will, and then structuring it accordingly. So this is very much a CRM exercise that can be done by a single person, but those first steps really need to be involved. The wider team needs to be involved. This is also one thing that, compare this to how this process went a couple of years ago versus now, AI is a great resource in this, right? And as you're pulling all of these requirements from different teams together, having AI help make sense of it and help structure what all that data should look like, where it should live, where there are potential gaps, and definitely something to utilize here. But so that's sort of the general process that we like to use. Again, very, very eager to hear also about how other people go about starting these sort of larger CRM audits projects on their side. But going one step further would be on the specific objects that you can and should use. Now, as mentioned in the beginning, this wouldn't necessarily be a session where we're going to go into the exact do's and don'ts and creative usages of specific objects. We definitely want to have sessions for that because there's a lot to discuss there. But we do want to just give some general takeaways, ways that we, how would you say that, typical rules of thumbs that we like to apply for most, if not all, sort of larger CRM projects. And I'll pass it back to Stjepan for this one to talk through some of those most common use cases of the standard objects in our portals.
Okay, thanks. So let's get specific about the 4 objects you will actually work with. We will be including custom objects later. And there's like custom classic mistakes hiding in each one that we usually see working with nonprofits. So first is contacts. So contacts are people, they're humans, they're individuals, they're always individuals. So the mistake that we see, and we see that constantly, is like showing households or whole organizations, or like a merged Frankenstein records into a contact object. So household is not a contact. A foundation is not a contact. So keep contacts as humans. So that's the one take that we want to get from here. There's also companies. In nonprofit terms, companies can be funders, partners, chapters, schools, like anything that's not individual, a human. The mistake here is that we usually see is missing or inconsistent association logic. And what I mean about that is like you create the organization, the partner, the chapter, but you never reliably link to the people to it. So the contacts. So the relationships exist only in your head, spread across your departments, and it's nowhere in the data. So then you cannot use a reporting that's native in HubSpot or any other CRM and just pull that, because it will not know where to look for it. Then there's deals. In nonprofit world, deals represent donations. They can represent grants, memberships, enrollments, anything moving through a process toward a close. So the mistake is building too many pipelines or wiring up stage logic that doesn't match reality, because like there's one way that you want to have it in your CRM, but there's the real way that is being tracked. So we'll come back to pipelines in the next slide because it deserves its own moment. But then there's another one, and that's where I think HubSpot shines. Those are called custom objects. You don't need a developer to create a custom object. And these are for genuine many-to-many relationships that need their own timeline. And that's why they're powerful. That's their power. But here's the mistake I want to save you some time. Reaching for a custom object on day one before you even exhausted what the native objects can really do. That's the mistake. Custom objects feel sophisticated, but usually try to exhaust all of the objects that you get natively and think how you should use them. And then go and say, okay, I have a data model, I have a brain that needs to have a custom object. So, two pro tips before we move on. First, custom objects require enterprise tier. So, if you're on pro and somebody's pitching you a custom object architecture, you will need to make sure that you have a budget conversation. Secondly, if you're migrating off Salesforce, households and soft credits do not migrate as is. So these are Salesforce native concepts. So that's where you will need to decide how would you push that to the HubSpot. And then also Maarten will touch base on that, how we think about like, okay, you're migrating. What we need to move to one system to another. Okay, so let's move to another slide, the common architecture tips that we want to share with you. So 4 patterns that came up basically every nonprofit portal that we touched. So there's a multi-role contact, same human being a donor and a volunteer and a program participant. The instinct is to create 3 separate records, and that's wrong because it's only one human. It's not that there's like twins or I don't know. So you want one record with role and type properties, or maybe labels, and you describe how they show up, not 3 parallel systems that will never ever reconcile. So one person is one record, but they can have many roles. It's up to you and your team how will you track that to inside HubSpot. Then there's the pipeline question. When do you make a new pipeline versus reuse the one that you have? There's a simple test. If the stages are nearly identical and the process takes the same amount of time and similar people are involved, you use one pipeline and a type property or tag to distinguish them. If the actual motion, the real work process is meaningfully different, there's like different stages, a lot of different automations, everything that you need to build there, then and only then do you split that into a separate pipeline. And different label is not a different motion. So don't duplicate a pipeline just because the deals, not the deals, but the grants, the memberships feel different. So that's another advice. And then there's the duplication trap, because we all have duplicate records, we don't trust the data. And that is the big one. So there's one source of truth per data point. If the same value lives in 2 places, then someone somewhere is eventually going to report maybe the wrong one if you don't have naming conventions and everything else. So here's the scenario. So let's say GiveButter and HubSpot both record a gift. So what's the source of truth? You need to decide that before you connect anything. The same is for Classy, DonorBox, Stripe, QuickBooks, or Legacy, Salesforce or other systems. And I'm not thinking about, let's say we have a Fundraise Up integration with HubSpot. Like we know that the donations will come from Fundraise Up, and that's our source of truth. But just like when there's 2 systems, make sure that you know which one is the one that lands and where it needs to land. Okay, so moving to the life cycle stages, do's and don'ts. And these are very important. Maybe you are thinking about what is life cycle stages. So life cycle stages is basically where you can track the whole journey you have with a donor or a member or maybe an organization or a partner or somebody else. And you decide how you track it. You decide the entry criteria, the exit criteria for each of the stage. So they're probably most abused feature. So let's get them right. So start with don'ts. Don't just map the default, I don't know, prospect or like somebody that's engaged or a subscriber to donor stages to the supporter journey because they came preloaded or they're inside the CRM that you're working on and you don't want to mess anything up. So a donor journey, and we know that working with nonprofit is not a sales funnel, and forcing it into one creates confusion that compounds that then also is also impacting the teams. So don't encode two different things, relationship depth and engagement type, into one field, because the relationships and engagements are not the same. That's trying to answer how committed somebody is to donate and how engaged they are with everything that your organization does. So don't do it in a single property or a single drop down because it can't be done cleanly. And please don't create a brand new lifecycle stage every single time you launch a new program or you launch a new campaign or something. That's how you end up with 40 stages. Nobody understands. By year 2 or 3, people don't want to use the system. They don't trust it. And now the do's. Design your stages around real inflection points, the moments where the relationships actually changes. Is it a first gift, however you call it, first donation? Is it a major donation or a major gift? Is it a lapsed donor or something else? Those are real transitions that you want to capture and then report on. So keep lifecycle focused on one thing, and that's relationship depth. How committed is this person to your mission, to your organization? And for the how do they engage? What programs do they want to engage with? What roles do they have? Use a separate role or type property. So those are two clean fields answering two clean questions, and this will outperform any overloaded field every time. And your reporting will thank you. And to get back to the example that Martin covered, like your board will thank you because then you can have the data everybody trusts when you're having those types of meeting. So let's go to a quick note of permissions, but important because this is only invisible until it isn't. So the problem is everybody wants to be a super admin in the system. Everybody wants to feel generous, collaborative, and that's how you can wreck up your portal, your system. When everybody can create properties, when everybody can get property changes, you get three fields that mean the same thing. You have fields that are living on forms, but the form is not tied to any marketing campaign, any attribution. You don't capture the UTMs correctly. We are just sharing our examples because we do have a couple of customers right now that just like have attribution problems because there were a lot of people doing stuff that were not tied together. So you get workflows as a super admin and you build it, maybe you turn it on and nobody knows because you didn't have a naming convention. So the solution here isn't complicated. So there's property groups, there's seats access, there's teams access, hierarchy, views permissions. Everything can be set up by teams with the new recently launched HubSpot import users feature. So you can get down by the roles and job titles. You can easily do that. And the rule that makes it coherent is access should also match ownership. So the real first move isn't a permissions setting at all. It's a conversation that you need to do with the teams, the managers. Like let's say there's a donor, like I don't know, a marketing manager who on the team needs to have this permission. So maybe somebody is just doing socials. They need maybe just socials. So decide who owns what, who owns donor data, who owns grant pipeline. Once ownership is clear, permissions will design themselves. And leave it to that. I'm kicking off to Maarten for the application part. I think this is where you will
Yeah.
put everything together.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Exactly. Third and final segment of all this, and to kind of tie it all together, right? In that section two, we're talking about all the different things that you can and should and shouldn't build, and I think in many cases it's a little bit or a lot overwhelming. You're going into your CRM, not really sure where to start. A lot of it depends on where exactly you are in your organization as a whole, in your CRM journey, right? So here we just want to have a quick moment to focus on, all right, actually applying some of this, actually going in and making some of these fixes, fixing the brain and the reflexes. Like, where do I start versus, or where do I assess where my organization should start? And while this is not an exact science, it's, again, kind of a framework of how to think about it, right? Which I guess is the theme of today's session as a whole. And so one kind of chart that we put together here, looking at, right, what are sort of the elements that you should be prioritizing, avoiding, or watching out for, depending on we say here the org size. It's a little arbitrary. I guess you could look at it more as in where you are in your CRM journey, if you will, right? If you have a relatively, you'd be a large organization with a brand new, clean CRM, you'd be relatively, in this chart, you'd be a small NPO by that. So depends a little bit how you look at it, but I think it makes sense when we go through it. In terms of priorities, I think if you're a small org, right, it's kind of boring by design, which is, as mentioned, by design. The main thing that you want to focus on there is keeping things clean, keeping things simple. I think this is the biggest trap that we see organizations fall into, especially when you get involved with a tool like HubSpot, right, where there's tons of features, and it's, the shiny object syndrome is very real, right? Yes, we need leads and deals, and we have 3 pipelines, and oh yeah, let's create a couple custom objects, and you, more often than not, you're creating much more of a mess than what you actually need. So I think that's sort of one of those key takeaways is, don't get too distracted by all the features that are there, and there's smart content and content remix, and it's all very fun, all very cool. But I think as a small organization, it's important to pay attention to that and say, let's not get carried away. Make sure we keep it simple. So we mentioned that here as well. Clean contacts, clean lifecycle stages, custom objects to avoid, right? There can be use cases for it, of course, but as Stjepan mentioned earlier as well, see if you can't exhaust the native objects there first. And then the thing to watch out for, obviously, is the overbuilding, right? The overcomplicating from the get-go, because it's a lot easier to build out something more complex from a simple pipeline than it is trying to re-simplify an already quite complex CRM. And Stjepan and I work on this on a weekly basis, so we can confirm that is definitely the case. It's much easier to build out something complex on something simple but solid than the other way around. So I think as a small MPO, that's sort of where your focus generally should be. When you're in that mid-size, when we say mid-size, I guess you could look at this more as a growing, expanding organization. And again, when I say growing, expanding, that could also mean in terms of your CRM strategy, your CRM usage, right? Are you pulling in more data into your CRM? Are more teams working out of a central platform? You'd be in that mid-size area, right? There, the primary focus is, all right, more people involved, more changes being made. Documentation is key there. I think that's the biggest trap that we see there is changes get made, and quite often good changes, good things that should be happening, but without the proper documentation, and then things get lost, right? And then one team is still working on based off of an older SOP, and then the new team has a new process set up, and those two are conflicting. So documentation is really the key here, whether that's lucid charts, shared documents, whatever it may be. Putting a strong emphasis on that is very important. Generally, what you want to avoid, kind of similar to if you're on the smaller MPO size, I guess this is a general thing to avoid overall, right, is duplicate pipelines, and this, again, that overcomplicating things, adding too many properties. But perhaps in sort of these mid-sized organizations, the extra nuance here is assuming there's more teams working in your portal, avoiding that everyone is creating their own needs and properties. As correct as they may be, there should always be that that central point of ownership, really, when it comes to your portal. And the main thing here to watch out for, this is why that big emphasis on documentation is there, is accumulated debt from we'll clean it up later, right? Again, super common. We see it all the time. Is quick workaround, another quick workaround. We're growing quick. We got 3 campaigns launching. Let's build this out. Or we just need a couple properties for this form. Let's add them there quickly. And then before you know it, right, you have several thousand properties, and it's quite a lot of work to get that cleaned up. So yeah, structure, documentation, templating as much as you can. That's really the focus point there. And then lastly, when we're looking at sort of larger organizations, I think this is where you kind of touched on it in the mid-size already, but that ownership governance piece becomes even more important. So again, more folks in your portal, more folks working out of the same system, ownership, access restrictions, all of that becomes increasingly important here. Change logs, right? Keeping track of what's been changed by who. I think this should be a big priority. If it's not already the case, if there isn't a clear ownership structure when it comes to your portal and you're working in a larger portal with more multiple teams involved, that should really be that number one priority. Things to generally avoid, and again, based off things that we see with large organizations that have a large portal, is building integrations on top of this. So, meaning especially complex integrations. You're bringing in your fundraising data into your HubSpot portal, your donation pipelines, whatever it may be. You're bringing in larger sets of data into your portal without a fully aligned data model, right? So really saying, okay, the data from one platform versus what's in my CRM, are they aligned? Did I take enough time mapping everything out in detail? Because again, and this is what we touched on all the way in the beginning, a lot of tools sell the reflexes, the automations, use our tool and your donations come in 1, 2, 3. And generally that's not incorrect, but that's only right if the foundation is there. And so that's something that's often overlooked and definitely important. And so the last one there in terms of things to watch out for, and I'm sure many people in this call have bumped into this, is keeping legacy structures in place that shouldn't be there. This is kind of similar to what we see there on the mid-sized accumulated debt. We'll clean it up later. A system's in place. We've always done it this way. We kind of keep building on it when foundationally it's wrong. So and knowing that it's a larger task to revamp it often gets ignored. But so anyway, quick little sort of snapshots of, and again, this is not a scientific in that sense, right? And it very much depends organization per organization, and all the things here mentioned as things to watch out for and things to avoid generally apply for all organizations, but it's intended to give you a little bit of a framework, right? In terms of what do I prioritize? What should my first focus points be? Next thing that I want to just quickly go through is when you are making these changes, right? When it's ownership rules or pipeline optimizations, et cetera, the general approach here. This is not rocket science, but this is something that, again, on our side, we always pull up every single time we go in and make changes to CRMs, to portals, is the same 5-step approach. It's a helpful guide, I feel, to have, and just as a reminder, and just to walk through it before making a change. Let's take as an example, we're adding a new donation pipeline, let's say, right? There's a new stream of donations, and then that needs to be in a separate pipeline for whatever reason. All right. First things first, mapping dependencies. So before going in, making any kind of changes, we're visualizing, we're mapping it out. We're not touching the portal. We're mapping everything out. And when we say mapping everything out, not just what this new automation or this new pipeline is going to look like, but where it touches on existing automations as well. That's the most crucial part, if anything. So fully mapping that completely outside of your portal. Then you want to go to what we call a freeze blast. It's essentially, all right, put a halt on everything. So I've mapped out my new donation pipeline. I know it's connected to a bunch of workflows that send out reminder emails. And we have another automation that pushes contacts into a retargeting campaign. So like these are all automations that we know are happening. If we're going to make changes to this pipeline, all of that needs to be paused, right? Otherwise, things can get messy real quick. So general freeze blast. Then you go into that third step of actually making the changes. Before then just reactivating it, one more important step is that backfill step. So again, let's say you've implemented a new pipeline with new stages that's more in line with your organization. Crucial that we first backfill retroactively go into our to our data and set the right stages and work the historic data into this new updated pipeline model before we actually reactivate any sort of automations. And only at that point we would go to step 5 and say, okay, now let's actually one by one restart our reflexes, if we want to call it that, our automations, our workflows, our email reminders, one by one. So making sure that they're in line with this new updated pipeline that we set up. So again, as mentioned, definitely not rocket science, but I feel like it's generally a good guide to have. Often when it comes to smaller changes, this kind of gets overlooked. And let me just go in and quickly make this change, right? But even for smaller changes, I would always say, go in, do this in sort of a miniature version, if you will, map it, freeze it, change it, backfill, and adjust the automations. That's generally a good rule of thumb for any changes in the portal. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah. And so with that said, just want to wrap things up. I think we're good on time, so we'll definitely have a couple minutes to chat through some questions. Very eager also to hear from everyone, but wanted to quickly summarize everything. The first thing we touched on, just as the biggest rule of thumb, really, is building the brain before you set up your reflexes. Your reflexes, when we say reflex, it's your automations, things that get triggered, etc. So that's really one of the main takeaways for today, is focusing on that brain first. And when we say the brain, the data model first, where does it live? How should it live? On which types of objects? Like, is that correct? Or am I building reflexes and reports, and am I plugging AI into a data model that is fundamentally incorrect? So making sure you do that thought exercise. Working backwards, right? That's sort of what we went into as sort of a general like a process tip of how to go about and assessing your data model, is working backwards from actual requirements. What are reports that you need to pull on a monthly, quarterly basis per team? Putting that all together, right, and having that be your guide to determine, okay, what data do I actually need, and where does it need to live in order for me to actually be able to report and get the numbers that I need. One source of truth per data point always. So it was mentioned a couple of times. One contact is one person. We often see portals still of one donor contact, one volunteer contact, and then one marketing contact, and it's technically all the same person. Some of them are linked, some aren't, and it gets very confusing. So really try to emphasize this one source of truth per data point. Building a solid foundation, not around the next campaign. That's kind of reiterating the whole build the brain before you wire the reflexes, right? And then prioritize based on where you are. So there's always a lot that you can change in any kind of portal, whether it's the immediate reflexes, whether it's the ownership rules, whether it's simplifying your pipeline, and whether it's using custom objects or not. Prioritize it based on where you are. Smaller, mid, larger size organization, how many people are involved, and set those priorities. And we discussed them, but generally it's smaller orgs, keep it simple. And you're in that mid-sized org, you're changing quite a lot. Documentation is key. And if you're a large organization, that focus should really be a lot more around ownership. Who's owning this? And we really need to guard the data that's in place. Cool. Stjepan, with that said, you want to just close us off?
Yep. Yeah, sure. And then we already have one questions, but we'll get to the questions in 2-3 minutes. So before we jump into QA, just here you can see what's coming. Every month we will cover another session. So register going to the HubSpot user group, the nonprofit hug. This is the whole everything that we planned in the next 4 months, from constituent journey mapping that we will be covering. Then there's reporting dashboards for development teams. There's Unbound. If you're coming to Unbound, please let us know. We will be there. Happy to chat with you. Happy to talk more about what you're doing, what you're planning, what's your problems or wins. So more details to come soon. We will share it across emails and other channels. And then there's also AI for nonprofits. But we are planning more and more. So every month we will have another session. So please let us know if there's your ideas that we can then put into the sessions. And then the second one, that's scan the QR code, connect with us on Slack, This is your door to the community that we want to grow, to make more impact together. We will share wins, potholes, templates, how-to videos, so the communities where the actual work can get easier. So yeah, just wanted to show that and share that, but we can jump into QAs.
Yeah.
So let me just go before we unmute anybody. There's like a couple of questions. So understand your point about individuals with multiple roles. However, sometimes one person is at multiple companies. So the best way to handle that, I would say labels, because that can be a label that is from a contact to a company or an organization. So you know like what role they have in that organization, what role they have in the other organization. We will be covering uh,
Real quick, Stefan, just real quick back on that one, and let me know if this is not what you meant, but association labels, right? Essentially, so you'd have one contact, you'd have the multiple companies, but if they have different roles within each of those, setting up association labels to indicate what those roles are. So it's, again, it kind of mimics the reality of life. It's one contact in multiple companies. So in your CRM, one contact, multiple companies, and associated with each. Diane, let me
yes.
know if that's in line with what you were asking there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And Diane has another question if we will be covering anything related program operational contacts, not funding donor contacts. So yeah, that's why we're here. We are getting your ideas. We are going to compile sessions. We will always share what's coming next every month. So and please, Diane, reach to us in Slack or LinkedIn, wherever you can find us, and we can chat more about it, see what are your ideas for upcoming sessions.
Yeah.
So yeah, but if anybody
even
wants to
even if
go
it's
off mic and ask questions, that's also perfectly
Yeah,
fine.
I think we got a couple more in the chat there as well. And Diane, real quick on that last one as well, because and if you join on Slack, happy to have a quick conversation about that, because either that's something that we could chat a bit more about just in the Slack directly, or perhaps we can flesh that out a little bit more, like what exactly that looks like for you, right? Program operational contacts. Yeah, just to see if we can flesh that out for perhaps a future session, but definitely interested in following that one up. Yeah. And then I see Justin mentioned you have to jump. I'm looking forward to journey mapping and reporting dashboard. Yes, so we are going to have, and we kind of mentioned this at the beginning as well. A lot of these sessions are going to be a lot more practical, right? Pull up, share screen, HubSpot, building out dashboards, reports, how to go about it. So I think those will be quite interesting as well. We have that one specifically on August 13th set up. But same thing there. If there's anything in the meantime, we're always happy to discuss these things and share ideas and things over Slack, over LinkedIn, however. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah,
And
there's a couple
then,
more questions. Do you want to read them, Martin?
yeah, I'm
We
going to
can,
read them out loud. So, how do you typically handle donations that include multiple designations in one payment? Also, how do you typically handle manual gift entry? So, Stefan, I don't know if you saw that one.
yeah,
But so donations with multiple designations.
maybe we'll need more context there, but like
What else
we can tackle while we're thinking, I think we can tackle how do you typically handle manual GIF entry. So if you do have a case where somebody is manually inputting GIF entry, maybe it's cash donations or something, uh, you can directly push it to HubSpot, open a deal, and track it that way. Or there's like a spreadsheet where you track it, and then you can easily connect a spreadsheet that like syncs every end of the day to HubSpot. But like I'm thinking like for multiple designations in one payment, so that can be like a line items on a single donation deal. So there's like multiple line items or one deal per designation, and then you group it by a shared key or somehow. I don't know, like you can split the, let's say, $1,000 gift into a 300 like deal, 200 deal, and then there's a same, maybe a payment ID, transaction ID, property, so you know that everything is a one big like I don't know, donation. So I think that's somehow you can track it. Probably we'll need to know more. Then also maybe a custom object, like a gift payment custom object as the parent. And then you have allocations or designations with like child records, one per fund or something. So there's a couple of ways we can probably do that. There's
Mhm.
just need to see like what you want to report, like we said at the beginning, and then how the data model can be built. But that's basically
Yeah,
how we will think about it. So
yeah.
anything to add?
And yeah, no, and I think because Dora shared something kind of similar, I do think that's something that's we can work into perhaps even into our next session, right? So, constituent journey mapping, it's not directly tied to it, but kind of similar, right? So where if payments come in, they're tied to different objects, how to go about setting that up. Yeah, sounds like that's something that multiple people are having questions about. So definitely interested in digging into that more and having like more specific examples. But yeah, happy to follow up with both of you also individually just to get some more context. But I feel like that's an interesting one to dig into, just understand what exactly that means for you and how we can then work that out in HubSpot lingo.
Yeah.
Um,
Another
there's one
question.
more here.
Okay.
Yeah. So is there a place that shows possible duplicate contacts? So there definitely is. Stjepan, maybe a bit more about that in terms of for who is it available, who can access
Yeah.
this? Because I know there are some
Yeah.
limitations.
So there's like native tool in HubSpot where you can see duplicate contacts, meaning humans or organizations. Depending on the tier, you can extend that, meaning that you can bulk merge like up to 100, or you can bulk merge everything. What we also recommend on that is like maybe if you have access to a data hub, that's a hub in HubSpot where you can use then custom created rules and workflows that will clean the data, meaning contacts or organizations, as you just add them by a unique identifier or a set of rule. But yeah, depending what tier do you have, Deanne, in HubSpot, you can share that with us and we can let you know what's available. There's also third-party apps like Coalifi or InCycle that we use. Coalifi is very high rated on HubSpot Marketplace, very easy to use, gets you a lot of data, and it's like native to HubSpot, same as InCycle. If you have more and larger set of data, you can use InCycle alongside with Data Hub. Just depends like what you currently have, how it's structured. So yeah, that's the answer there. The another one is, can you give us examples of what kinds of different pipelines we will need? That is that
Right.
probably is your like, what are you doing? Like, are you only having donations? Are you also having grants? Do you have volunteers? But maybe you need a volunteer pipeline to track what's happening. How are you getting those people assigned and routed and something? So just it depends. What are you doing? Do you have memberships? Do you have, I don't know, anything that you want to track? That's where we will go with the pipeline, and you can set up the stages and criteria and how that's being tracked. But anything to
Yeah.
add there, Martin?
Yeah, I think because pipelines, that's another one of those where, and when we're talking about smaller organizations using every feature, do you need everything? In most cases, you're going to have at least one use case for a pipeline, but we definitely work also with orgs that don't need one at all, right? Where so again, general kind of, and this is a bit more like top of mind, but when do you need a pipeline? First of all, if there's an actual funnel progression of whatever it is you're tracking. So donations are a clear example of that, right? There's donations come in that come in, that needs to be processed, and then it needs to be saying, all right, donation completed, right? So that's okay. We have a pipeline for that because it goes through different stages and there's an endpoint. So that makes sense to set up a pipeline for. When do we need additional pipelines? Hey, let's say we have 5 different types of donations. People can set up a recurring gift. People can do one-time donations. Then you ask yourself the question, all right, how different is that process? Is the process generally the same? Keep it in one pipeline, the general rule, and just tag things. Hey, this is a recurring donation. This is a one-time donation, but keep one pipeline. That's I feel like an easy trap to fall into is separate pipelines for every single thing. But then like what Stjepan mentioned, right, then it's very much org specific. Do you have volunteer pipeline? Do you have donations? Is there a grant management aspect in your org as well? So that very much depends. I feel like in most of our cases, Stjepan, is this accurate to say that we typically work with anywhere between 1 and 5 pipelines? And again, this is very much generalizing, right? But you'll likely not need more than that, right? Like 5 streams of sort of funnel progression actions that happen within your org that need to be represented by a pipeline. But generally, I would say, less is more in that sense. But yeah, happy to see it and happy to chat about that more with, for your specific use case. Yeah. And then I see Karen mentioned this as well. We should do a revenue focused event. Yes. So exactly based off of some of these questions.
Okay. There's Kevin. Kevin asks, I don't know if this is a question or just you're sharing, Kevin, for multiple payments. One example is that our foundation accepts general donations as well as donations for each of 3 separate programs. So someone company can donate to 1, 2, 3, or all 4. You track donations separately for each of the 4 options. Is there like any questions there, or you're just asking, can you do it more simplified or easier?
Is that, and Kevin, maybe just a quick follow-up question. I see you're unmuted. So maybe, I'm curious then, in your case, are those programs, right, that people can donate to, are those custom objects in your portal? Is that how you have it set up?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And this was more just trying to clarify an earlier question when somebody was accepting multiple payments and how to direct those into the right account, so to speak. So
yeah, and then and how that would look if you're using like you're using custom objects versus if you're not, then how you go about splitting up those payments would look different. But definitely, I think that is one of the key takeaways. Like a revenue, like a finance focused session, right, on how to go about handling payments in different scenarios. I feel like that's a good one, Stjepan, for us to squeeze into the planning, whether we add it to an existing session or maybe throw something in between. That's an interesting one.
And then I think, like, thanks for clarifying, Kevin. So I think then the parent-child allocation model, where you're using custom objects, is probably where you're committed on. So maybe just making sure that like you get what you need to the reporting part. But just to be respectful of everybody's time, we are at the end. And we want to continue these conversations. A great idea to have a revenue focused session just came up doing this one first session. We have more to come, and there's a lot of things that we can and we will share with you guys. So just shoot us a message, connect with us on LinkedIn or be in Slack channel, and we can talk more about it after this session. And have a great rest of your Thursday, and see you at the next one, probably in a month. Constituent journey mapping. And thanks for spending an hour with us. Appreciate you all. And yeah, that's it. Any last words, Maarten?
Appreciate it, guys. No, very much appreciated. Thanks everyone for showing up. The questions. This was great. This gives us so much input as well. And looking forward to keeping the discussion going. Awesome.
Thank
you. Have
a
good weekend, long weekend for some folks in the US. And talk to you all very soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.